It's not a lake, it's an ocean. And in that ocean lies a platinum trophy for Alan Wake Remastered. With Halloween and all its spooky activities behind us, I was looking for a scary game to keep me company throughout October. With Alan Wake 2 recently released, which I plan on covering in the future, I thought this was the perfect time to get my platinum for Alan Wake Remastered. I played the original Alan Wake a few years ago on my PC soon after I finished playing Control, which I loved. I remember having a blast playing it then, and I still had fun playing it for this video. The platinum trophy wasn't anything too difficult, and it took me way less than the estimated time according to PSN profiles. The only challenge that seemed to be ahead of me was completing the game on the hardest difficulty and completing chapter-specific trophies. But with the formalities out of the way, let's take a trip to Bright Falls and get ourselves a platinum trophy. As Alan Wake, things start very abruptly when he runs into a man and he is thrust into a nightmare. Going off the intended path, we're given a brief tutorial sequence on how the game's central mechanic of using light to defeat enemies works. After listening to this ominous figure, I was rewarded with my first trophy. The next one came shortly after when I avoided getting hit with some style. After reaching the lighthouse, Alan wakes up from his nightmare and we reach our getaway location of Bright Falls. I get acquainted with the townfolk, help a couple of old heads relive their youth by playing Coconut on the jukebox, and get the keys to our cabin. It's a nice place, but the power doesn't seem to be working, and Alice is terrified of the dark. I go to a generator out back and get it working again, which gave me another trophy. Alan and Alice get into an argument and things go awry when Alice is dragged into a lake. For the next week, Alan is forced to write a story that we eventually get sucked into. Making our way through that story, we head to a gas station hoping to find someone who can at least try and help us. The hike is long, full of those who have been taken over by the darkness, and we eventually find Stucky, the landlord who was supposed to give us our keys to the cabin. I'm left with no other choice but to put him down. As the chapter comes to a close, we finally make it to the gas station and make a phone call to Bright Falls Police Department, ending Chapter 1.
Previously on Alan Wake.
With Chapter 1 being an insight into the game's mechanics and its world, Chapter 2 ramps things up in terms of length, and I was able to get a decent number of trophies in this chapter. After a quick flashback with Alan and Alice, we're back in the present day inside of the sheriff's department. After a little scuffle with Dr. Hartman, the man who invited us to Bright Falls, we head to a few places to find someone who might have information on Alice. The night falls upon us and we head to a place called Lover's Peak. However, something happens to a cabin along the way. It's destroyed and we're forced to fight the park ranger. Like Stucky, he takes a lot of damage, but defeating him gives us the first story-related trophy for this chapter. Now I think would be a good time to take a break from the story and talk about the collectible-related trophies. This game has roughly 300 collectibles to find across all 6 of the game's chapters. These include coffee thermoses, manuscript pages detailing the game's events, chests full of useful equipment, canned pyramids, signs that give away Bright Falls' history, along with radio and TV shows. During my first playthrough, I had a guide running alongside me because I definitely wouldn't have managed to find all of these on my own, so a quick shout out to Trophy Tom, who provided a well put together collectible and trophy guide as well. There were many times during these videos when he would show when a good time would be to get a miscellaneous trophy, which I really appreciate. Back to the trophies, I got my first collectible related one after finding 5 hidden chests. Then after picking up my 25th coffee thermos, and finding the 25th manuscript page. While I'm at it, I figure I would go ahead and talk about the miscellaneous ones I got during this chapter as well. One of the game's weapons is a flare, which can help rid the Taken of the darkness. I first got it during this chapter and unlocked a trophy after using it to give myself some breathing room. I got one for doing a slow-mo dodge 20 times, killing 15 Taken with a vehicle, wiping out 4 Taken with a single flare, and defeating 1,000 ravens. There was a really good spot towards the end of chapter 2 when hundreds of ravens would attack you at once. I used this opportunity to take out a couple hundred of them at a time and then restart to my previous checkpoint and do the same thing over again. Doing this a few times unlocked what would have been a tedious trophy later on. When all that was done, I made it through another deadly night and finished chapter 2.
Previously on Alan Wake.
Chapter 3 is by far the longest chapter, but I honestly didn't get as many trophies during this one. It starts in a trailer park where a waitress from a diner has pages from Alan's manuscript. We get drugged, and it's not long until we're back in the nighttime, and much of this episode sees us escaping from the police. Heading to a radio station, I find a new weapon that will help fight the Taken, a flashbang. Soon after I found them, I blasted 4 Taken into ash with a single one. I also managed to take out 2 Taken with a single shot from my shotgun, and knocked over 5 can pyramids. Once I made it to the radio station, the police caught up to me, so I was back on the run. While I was looking for a vehicle, a bulldozer sprung out of nowhere. But it was nothing a few flares couldn't take care of. Escaping the night, I head to a coal mine to find the man who has Alice. I waited, but he didn't show up. After a phone call, I head to Mirror Peak. Along the way, I come across many different enemies like poltergeist objects, random objects scattered across the environment that seem to be taken by the darkness. Destroying 20 of them gave me a trophy. To cap things off, I had to fight a train that stood in my way. In making my way through a mine, I find the kidnapper, but he gets taken by the darkness and I plummet into the waters below, ending chapter 3.
Previously on Alan Wake. I'm hunted by the law.
Chapter 4 starts with Alan waking up in Dr. Hartman's facility. He's essentially the reason we're here in the first place, and while Alan doesn't express any interest in being here, he humors Dr. Hartman and tries to write some more. Of course, if you haven't realized by now, something bad happens, allowing Alan to escape, and of course, we're back in the nighttime. Looking for my manuscript pages, I found recording sessions between Dr. Hartman and Alice. Listening to all 3 recordings unlocks a trophy.
I'm buying that. I was tailing Wheeler, and this is the only place he could have gone.
I find the pages, but the dark presence begins to take over. I have to find a way out, but not before checking out an episode of Night Springs. Man, I love this show. After meeting up with Barry, we head to the Anderson farm to try and find some kind of answer to what's going on. On the way to the farm, we pass by a stage when the Taken ambush us. There are way too many to count, but we find out the equipment still works and provides enough light to help fend off the darkness. This section was brilliant, not only from a story and gameplay standpoint, but also in terms of trophies. Something I briefly touched on in the previous chapters are kill-related trophies. Every single weapon in the game has some kind of trophy attached to it, and the stars aligned perfectly for me during this section. Any kill-related trophy I didn't unlock at this point, I managed to get here after restarting my checkpoint about a dozen or so times. This included 50 kills with the shotgun, flashbang, flare gun, hunting rifle, and 100 kills with my revolver. It was also during this portion of the game when I got a trophy for changing batteries 100 times and killing 20 Taken through indirect means. Finally, I made it through the entire encounter without my health dropping below 25%.
That was awesome!
From here, it's a straight shot to the barn, but I managed to get another collectible related trophy along the way. I also mentioned earlier that there are radio and TV shows scattered around each chapter, but they're rare compared to the other collectibles. At most, you may find 3 or 4 in a chapter. For the radio specifically, it details the events that either have or will come to Bright Falls. Following along with the guide, I found the last one I needed for the trophy during this chapter.
As you regular listeners know, I tend to work through the night.
To end chapter 4, the 2 boys have a drinking session, which gives us more insight into what happened the night Alice was taken.
Previously on Alan Wake.
We're in jail, and the darkness makes its presence known right away when it takes Detective Nightingale. The sheriff is willing to help us warn the town of the looming threat the darkness possesses. I ventured off the beaten path a lot at the beginning of this chapter looking for collectibles, which I will get into in just a moment, when I stumbled back into the diner. I head to the jukebox that was here during chapter 1. I needed a break from the chaos that was happening outside, so I decided to play Coconut again.
This week you can't remember?
Oh, I remember now.
Those old heads were really onto something. This chapter was pretty light when it came to trophies, so the only other ones I got here were story related. The first one happened after I found Miss Weaver at the power plant. She tells us about a well-lit room to help fight the darkness. We can only reach it through a secret pipe, but something was damaged, preventing us from going. I had to cut some power, which unlocked a trophy.
Who designed these things?
After catching up with Weaver, Barry, and the sheriff, I made it through a tough escape at the top of a dam and made it to the well-lit room.
Previously on Alan Wake, I wrote a horror story that has come true.
For the final chapter, we start with another flashback. This time, Alan has a hangover when I get a call from Barry telling me to turn on an interview, which gave me a trophy for finding all of the TV shows. I also managed to get a few more collectible trophies while heading to Cauldron Lake. The first was for examining every sign and points of interest in Bright Falls, finding all hidden chests, and finding every manuscript page I could during my normal playthrough. There is one more, but I do want to save it for later since I quite literally found it at the end of the game. For now, I want to talk about the chapter-specific trophy. From my understanding, each chapter, excluding the first one, has some kind of hidden objective during a specific moment. Surviving the stage encounter in stage 4 is an excellent example. I didn't get one for chapters 3 and 5, but I did get one for 6. I had to make it from the dam to Cauldron Lake without firing a single bullet. Flares, flashbangs, and a vehicle were all okay though. This was an interesting challenge to get through since I pretty much had to go the entire episode without firing a gun, but it was nothing too difficult, and I was able to get it during my first playthrough. Now, it's on to finish the game. A tornado was standing in my way, but a few flares took it down. Thrown directly into a nightmare, I had to use the light to create a path so I could leave. But first, I had to get my final coffee thermos, giving me the last collectible trophy I needed. With Alice free and Alan trapped in the darkness, the game has come to an end, and I got 2 trophies for completing the game on easy and normal difficulties. But as you can see, my platinum journey is not over just yet. To completely 100% Alan Wake, I have to play the game again on the Nightmare difficulty. Aside from being in the game's hard mode, it also unlocks additional manuscript pages. On top of that, I have to do the 2 chapter specific trophies I missed the first time around. I got started on my Nightmare playthrough soon after finishing my first one, and it wasn't as bad as the tutorial made it seem. I thought I was going to have to unload a couple of clips into an enemy, but in reality, they only need another bullet to go down depending on the weapon I was using. However, I did try to avoid any fight that I could during this playthrough. Sometimes it was successful, but more times than not, yeah, you get the picture. I will admit there were a few times where I let my rage get the best of me. Bro, are you? Fuck this bridge! And it also didn't help that another game I was trying to platinum at the same time completely glitched on me, which added fuel to the rage engine. But I pulled through and managed to finish the game on the Nightmare difficulty after a few days. Just like my first playthrough, I had Trophy Tom at my side to pick up the 15 manuscripts for this difficulty. Some were pretty obvious as they quite literally were on the beaten path, but others were hidden pretty well. After grabbing the final one, I unlocked the very last collectible trophy for Alan Wake. Lastly were the chapter specific trophies for chapters 3 and 5. During chapter 3, I had to make it from the museum to Cauldron Lake Lookout in less than 30 minutes. I was able to get it during the Nightmare playthrough, although I was cutting it pretty close.
I could see Cauldron Lake. I thought I could make out the spot where the island and the cabin had been.
Finally, I had to fight through the streets of Bright Falls without getting killed during chapter 5. Now, trying to do this on the Nightmare difficulty is damn near impossible, at least the way I was trying to go about it. There are so many enemies that the game throws at you during this section, and on top of that, there are sequences where you have to survive many assaults, making my demise inevitable. I had to go back after my nightmare playthrough to get this. Setting the game to easy, I spent the next 20 minutes making my way through the streets of Bright Falls until I could take a chopper to the woods, giving me the trophy and the platinum.
You know how to deal with this, Wake. I guess you New Yorkers are used to rough situations like this.
Right. The city's a war zone. King Kong, mutant alligators, and Alex Casey shoots the place up every weekend.
With this being my second time playing Alan Wake, my thoughts are still the same as they were when I played this game for the first time. The story is still as intriguing, with a cliffhanger ending that I assume picks right on up in Alan Wake 2. While its gameplay can be simple at times, it never grew boring by any means, with enough weapons to spice things up from time to time. There are some gripes I do have, like the sprint and some of the animations still feeling dated for a remaster, but those are only minor complaints. The trophy list itself was pretty fun and helped enhance my experience, which I always find to be the best ones. Most of the list is straightforward, consisting of story and kill-based trophies, along with the ones for collecting a staggering amount of collectibles. The trophies I enjoyed getting were the chapter-specific ones. If I had to pick one, it would be for chapter 6, where I essentially have to go the entire chapter without firing a gun. I had to change up the way I played and needed to be smart when it came to using my flares and flashbangs. But at the end of the day, I enjoyed my time here with Alan Wake with a platinum that was just as fun to go through. I look forward to sharing my thoughts on Alan Wake 2's Platinum sometime in the future. That concludes this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. What do you think of Alan Wake? Leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. See you guys next time.